Clay Helberg from Terra XML with us. He's going to talk about embedding data queries into your documents and formatting the data results for publishing. I'd like to take this opportunity to remind everyone about all of the resources available to the Arbortext community. As many of you know, ours is a large and very active community. There's a chart here. It's maintained single sourcing. The URL is at the bottom of the page. It's as near a complete a list as we've got. All of these are free resources, and most are online. I'm not going to go through the whole list. There's a lot of them, as you can see, and varied widely. We are the one in the top line. Really quickly, here's our list of upcoming events. There's a professional development seminar in San Jose in May. Our next regular meeting will be the ROI of a data learning specialization case study by Scott Youngblum at Oberon Technologies. The PTC User World event is the first week of June, and our June meeting is already scheduled. It's a developer's guide to IsoDraw by Trevor Hendricks at Kohler. Today's presentation is Dynamic Publishing with Arbortext Data Merge by Clay Helberg. Clay is a senior consultant at Terra XML. He has worked in XML and XSLT technology since 2000 and with Arbortext since 2002. He provides consulting and development services on a wide variety of projects, and he's presented at several Arbortext user group meetings, including the last 3 PTC User World events. He telecommutes from Duluth, Minnesota. Now I'll turn the presentation over to Clay Helberg. Clay, it's all yours.
Okay. Let's see, I gotta figure out how to show my slides. Okay, do you see my slides? Or my first slide anyway? Okay, great. All right, so I'm going to talk about using data merge to publish dynamic documents. Let's see, there we go. Okay, so what's data merge? Okay, the typical way that you publish a document is you've got an XML document which is maybe stored in a content management system, and you pull it out and you do something with it, you edit it, you save it, and then you publish it. Okay, so what does data merge add to this? Data merge adds the ability to go to an operational data store, a database, and pull information out of that and incorporate it with your document. Okay, so what's the advantage of doing that? Well, there are lots of times where you might need to publish documents that contain that kind of data. Some examples would be maybe a price list, an employee directory, research reports, account statements, and so on, where you've got a document that has at least some section in it where you want to have a list of things that come from a database, where the information is maintained in a database. The sort of naive way to do this is to get a report out of the database, copy the results of the report, and paste it into your document, and then publish the document. You know, there are a lot of drawbacks to that kind of approach. Number one, it's tedious. Number two, it can be error-prone. You might forget to update something. You might select the wrong set of rows from the reports or whatever. What you would like to have is you would like to have a system that would let you put something in there that you could set up and then just forget about it and be confident that it would always pull the right data out and that the data would always be up to date. And that's exactly what data merge does for you. So how do you set this up? There's 2 pieces to it. The first piece is that an administrator or an application developer has to set up the queries that are relevant for your documents. So if you have a parts catalog, you would have someone set up the queries that know about the database where your parts data live and how to pull them out and what to do with them so that they appear correctly in the document. So once the developer sets up the database and sets up the query to get the information out, then the authors will be able to insert a query into a document that will pull the data out and insert it into a specific document for publishing. All right, so this is just a sort of a flow chart that shows how how the pieces fit together. In the upper left, you've got your database. This communicates with Arbortext through a technology called ODBC, which I'll talk about more in a minute. You have a data merge configuration file, which gives Arbortext information about where the database is, how to access it, what you want to get out of it, and so on. Then in the editor, you insert a query to pull the data out of the database, and then you can send that to the publishing engine, or if you're using Print Composer, you can print that way too, and it will incorporate the data in the published output. Are there any questions so far?
None at this time.
Okay, I'll forge ahead. So what is
We have more
ODBC?
attendees showing up, just so you know.
Oh, do we? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Oh,
yeah.
Saturday, up to 7
Saturday
now.
morning.
All right. Okay. So configuring an ODBC data source. What is ODBC? It's an acronym. It stands for Open Database Connectivity. It's basically a system that Microsoft cooked up to let different databases communicate with each other relatively easily. It's sort of an abstraction layer that goes on top of the database that lets an application access data in a database without necessarily having to know all the gory details of how that database is implemented. So the way you do this is you configure a data source that has the information about your specific database and makes it available as an ODBC data source. And this slide shows sort of how you get to the place where you set that up. So this is Windows Vista. It's going to be a little bit different if you're on XP, and I haven't upgraded to Windows 7 yet, so I'm not sure what the differences are there. But you know, consult the documentation if you're on a different operating system.
Sorry, Clay. I have a question
Sure.
for you.
Oh, sure.
Can you access an ODBC data source when using ACM as a CMS?
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe so. It would the access happens actually in either editor or in the publishing engine when you publish. So I think it would be actually independent of the CMS you're using.
Sounds good to me too.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
So what happens is, you know, it accesses the data when you either open the document in editor or when you publish it. But as far as storage goes, it doesn't matter. It's, you know, it basically inserts a specific kind of namespaced element in the document that describes the query that you're using. But apart from that, in terms of storage, it doesn't do anything special. Okay?
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, so you get to your control panel, you open the administrative tools, and then in there you'll see this this icon for data sources. Okay, so you open that up. You select your system DSN, and then click Add, and then there are going to be different kinds of drivers for different kinds of data sources. The main example I'm using today is going to be just a Microsoft Excel file, which kind of masquerades as a database. Just for simplicity and because most people are familiar with Excel, more so than a real database like Oracle. You know, any database you have that has an ODBC driver can be used for this.
Okay, cool.
So setting up the data source, when you go to set it up, you'll get a little dialog, and the options you have on that dialog will depend on what kind of database you're setting up. So if you're setting up an Oracle database, it's going to have different parameters and options available than a simple Excel spreadsheet like this. So, you know, I put up the one that shows up if you do Excel, but if you're doing something more complicated with MySQL or SQL Server or something else, you'll need to work with your database administrator to make sure that this is set up correctly so that you can access the data. And, those details are beyond the scope of this presentation, as they say. Okay, so setting up the queries. When you define a query, you're going to use what they call structured query language, or SQL. Sometimes people call it SQL. This is sort of a standard database query language. Pretty much any modern database is going to understand this. And this is it's an integral part of ODBC as well. Basic queries are generally not too hairy. Just sort of a two-slide primer on SQL. You're going to specify what table you want to draw data from. So a lot of databases have more than one table. So you have to specify which table or tables you want to draw from. You want to specify which fields you want to select, or if you just want to select everything, you can use a star. You can specify specific rows using a test. So you could say, select the employees where department ID is some specific value, and then it will only select the employees from that department. You can also do calculations. If you group the records by department, say, then you can compute sums or averages, various other things. Okay, so here's an example of a fairly simple query and how it maps to the data. So the first thing we have is select employee ID, first name, last name, salary. So that first part says which fields we want or which variables. So we're grabbing these first three columns and then the salary column here. The from employees part, that determines which table we want to draw from. If you squint a little bit, you can kind of see that this particular Excel file has three tables in it, or three spreadsheets, employees, departments, and jobs. So when we say from employees, that means we want to draw from the employees table and not from these other ones. And then we say where department ID equals 60. So what that means is that we only want the rows where the department ID has the value we've specified. Okay, so when we do this query, what we get back is a result set, and the result set contains the data that we've asked for. And you can see it here rendered as a table. So we get these four columns that we've asked for, and we get the rows where we have the matching department ID. So we get those 5 records there. Okay. SQL is a whole big involved thing too, beyond the scope of the talk. So if you need help putting together a more complicated query, sometimes queries will involve extracting data from more than one table and matching them together. You might have the departments table, for example, might have some information that you want about the department, and then you would have to do what they call a join, which means that you're matching up the employee records with the appropriate department based on the department ID, and that stuff is all very doable. People who run databases do it all the time, but I'm not going to talk about it today. So if you have to do that kind of stuff, consult your DBA or go online and do some research, and there are plenty of tutorials about using SQL, so you can find out information that way. Another thing that's cool about data merge is that it gives you the ability to parameterize your queries. What I mean by that is that if I go back to this, you see how I've specified various things here. You can, instead of saying where department ID equals 60, you can replace that 60 with a question mark. And then what happens is when you execute that query, Arbortext will pop up a dialog and ask the user, which department do you want? and the user can select from a list or type in or however you set up the user interface for that. So it's a way of adding some flexibility to the parameter. If you just hard code everything, then you're always getting the same set of data, which sometimes is what you want, but sometimes you want to give the author the ability to make a selection there. For example, if you want to show a list of employees, you might want the author might want to be able to limit that to a specific department, and it might not always be the same department. So adding a parameter lets the author say, well, in this spot I want to have the accounting employees, and in this other spot I want to have the marketing employees, and so on. Okay, so here's an example of what happens with a parameterized query. So this is we have a query called insert department employee list where they select department, and then that pops up this dialog where they have a drop list and they can choose whichever department they're interested in. Okay, so we sort of have an idea of what a query is. So how do you make Arbortext understand what your query is and what to do with it? Well, these are the steps involved. The first thing you do is you have to configure your DCF file, your main doc type configuration file, to know that you have data merges attached to that data type or doc type. You create a DMF file, which is a data merge configuration file, and that's where the bulk of the information about the query goes. So these other points are actually sort of things that go inside the DMF file. So the third thing is set up the connection string. This tells Arbortext where's the data source you want to use. If you're logging in as a specific user account, you specify that, and other things that are involved in making sure you're hitting the right data source. The next step is to put together the database query code, the SQL, like we saw a minute ago. Then you would set up the user interface items for any query parameters that you have. So any question marks in your query, you would need to set up what the user interface looks like when the author has to specify those parameterized values. And finally, you have to decide what you're going to do with the data that you get back from the database. Okay, so the first step, DCF settings for data merge. So in your DCF file, there's a place where you can insert a data merge element. Okay, and inside that you have a data source element that has the name of your query file, which is your DMF file, and then your the name for the data source. And you can actually have multiple data source elements in there if you have multiple queries set up. Okay, so creating the DMF file, my advice is to not try to build one from scratch, but take one of the examples out of the samples directory and start with that and modify it to fit your needs instead of trying to mock one up from scratch. It'll give you a big head start, and it'll help you to see how the pieces fit together. So, take a copy of that, put it into your custom directory under data merge, and make sure that the name of the file that you have there matches what you've set up in your DCF file as the configuration file.
Right.
Do we have a question?
Handy. No, that looks handy.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so specifying the connection string, if you look inside the DMF file, you'll find there's a parameter group ref that has name ref connection properties, and then the value element inside that has the connection string. The connection string is a unique string that identifies the data source. In a way, it's a little bit like a URL. It's not formatted in the same way as a URL, but it sort of plays the same role as a URL. So the typical case is going to be JDBC : ODBC : and then the name, the DSN name that you gave it when you set it up in your data sources. However, there are, some database types will use a different syntax for that, or slightly different syntax, and so this is another one of those things where you need to check with your database administrator to make sure that you've got the connection string right. Okay. So, for example, and in some cases, you can also include some login credentials as part of that connection string. So, for example, in what we have here is a connection to an Oracle database, and what we're saying is we want to log in as JDoe with the password, and then we specify the host computer, the port number, and the database type. Okay, so this is a specific format for an Oracle database. Now, you have to be careful if you're doing this because this stuff is all stored as clear text. So, you don't want to be setting up with the administrator account here, right? If you're going to do it this way, you really should set up a dummy account with very restricted privileges, a read-only account that can only access the data that you really need access to, and that way you'll minimize the chance that somebody can get that password out of there and go wreak some havoc on your database.
Absolutely.
Okay, other connection properties. You can pass values to the database using the connection properties parameters. And again, this is going to depend on which database you're using and the specifics of how your particular database is set up. For simple JDBC data sources like an Excel file, the URL is all you need. For others, you can pass in login and credentials if you're not using the URL format that we saw on the last slide. If you want to get some hints about how this works, if you look in the data merge directory in your Arbortext installation folder, look at the entity files that are in there, and there will be different entity files for different database types. So if you can find the one that corresponds to your database type, you can open it up and there will be comments in there that describe what the things are and what to do with them. And so hopefully between the information there and conversing with your database administrator, you can figure out the right way to pass the parameters to the database to make sure the query comes out right. Okay, so once you've got that set up, you're ready to look at the SQL query. This goes inside the SQL statement parameter ref. And this is that SQL string that we saw the example of earlier. On this slide, I show a more sort of more streamlined example. In this case, we're just selecting all the fields from the employees table, and we want to limit it to a specific department, but we want to let the author decide which department gets selected. And so instead of putting a specific value in there, we put that question mark in there. Okay. So now that we have a question mark in there, we have to give Arbortext a little bit of information about what that means and how to handle it. So for every question mark, you have to define a parameter in the query parameters group. Okay, so you'll have a parameter ref, you can give it a data type, and then you give it a name ref, which is just a string that you use. It's like an ID ref, or no, an ID attribute that you'll use to refer to it when you set up the user interface for this. Okay, and typically they just use sequential, PO1, PO2, and so on. Okay, so setting up the UI, there's an interface section in your DMF, and you have a few different control types you can select from. You can choose a text box or a password text box, where the characters are replaced with little dots or stars, a combo box, a list, and a file chooser. So you have some flexibility in terms of how the user interface is set up. As much as possible, you want to try and give them a list of values to choose from rather than having them type in information. You have to qualify that a little bit. If they want to look up an individual employee to insert some data about that employee, you probably have to just let them type in a name. But if they're selecting a department, it's probably better to provide them a list of departments to choose from rather than making them type it in, just to avoid problems with typos and things like that. Okay, so here's an example of defining a query UI. So in this case, again, this is where the parameter is to select the department that you want to choose from. And so inside the interface element, we have a query field. We tell it what type of control we want to use. We want to use a combo box. And this name attribute maps to the query parameter that we defined earlier. You remember where we had a PO1? So this is where we map. We say, when the user selects something here, it's going to go and replace that first question mark in the query. Okay. The value setting we have here. Can you see my little pointer when I do this?
Yes, we can.
Okay, cool. So this determines the default selection when the dialog is first set up. And then you define a label for the list, and then you add this is where you specify the actual choices available. Okay, and then finally handling the result set. So once you've got the data out of the database, what do you want to do with it before you stick it in your document? So there's basically two options here. The first option is just to make a table out of it, a CALS table. Well, you can specify the table model, but to set it up as a literal table in your document. And that's pretty easy because it's, Arbortext handles all the details for you. If you want something different, if you don't want to make a table out of it, but you want to construct some text or you want to make it into list items or something like that, you can also do that. The way you do that is by using an XSL transformation to transform. What you get back in the result set is actually a chunk of XML. And so you can apply a transformation to that to essentially do anything you want with it. Okay, so formatting it as a table is nice and straightforward. You just say, give me a table, you tell it what your table model is, and you're done. Okay, with the XSL, you can do anything, anything you can do with an XSL transformation, you can do with your result set. So, you have a whole lot of control there. Of course, it needs a little bit more development work to set up the style sheet that spits out the format you want, but you always have that trade-off, right? So in your DMF file for your query, if you wanted to do the XSL transformation, you'd set the query type to freeform. And one potential gotcha is that if you're doing it this way, your XSLT result tree, because what your transformation spits out at the end, it needs to have a single container element. If you try to spit out just a series of paragraphs with no wrapper element, for example, you're going to run into problems because it's not going to be a proper document, so it's not going to be able to do what it needs to do to insert it into your main document. Okay, so the XML that you get back from the database looks something like this. So you have the container as the result set, and then you've got a row header, which has the headers that go across the top of the table if you're building a table out of it. And then you've got, rows, and each row has a column, and then each column has a value. So it's a very tabular sort of result that you get back. If you want more details about this, you can look at the DTD for this. There is a DTD file for this XML structure. It's in doctypes result set. and it's got some comments in it. So if you're not certain exactly how the pieces fit together or what to do with them, you can look there and get some clues there. Okay, so this is an example where I'm applying arbitrary formatting to the data that comes back. Basically what I'm doing is I'm saying, give me one row of data for each department, and in that row give me the name of the department, the code for the department, the number of employees in that department, and the average salary for that department. And so it's going to give me back a table like this, okay? And then, so for each department, there will be one row, and then it'll have columns corresponding to those values, okay? And then what I'm doing is I'm applying an XSL transformation to take that table of information and convert it into an ordered list, and then each department gets a list item, and then we construct this sort of descriptive string of text based on the values that I'm getting out of the database. Okay, so completing the query with the output info. So this is an example of what you would set up in your DMF file if you just want to get a table out, a straightforward table. You look for the name ref table model transformer, and you specify the table model you want. If you have multiple wrapper tags, you can specify the wrapper tag. You can specify a header color. Okay, and then on the query itself, you want to set the query type to table. And that tells Arbortext, okay, when you get the results back, just throw it into an Oasis Exchange table, make the headers blue, and that's all we need. For the XSL transformation, you use XSL transformer as the name ref instead of the other one. And then you have to provide a parameter that tells where to find the style sheet. So you set it up with the location of your style sheet, and then you're done with that. And then, most of the hard work there is then actually then building the style sheet to do the transformation you want. And then on the query, set your query type to freeform. You can set up multiple queries in a single file. So a single DMF file can have multiple queries in it. And so you can have queries that hit different databases or different tables within the same database. Queries that produce different output formatting. So you could have one query that formats the results as a table, and another query that takes the same data and formats it in some other format using an XSL transformation. You can select different subsets of fields or records. So you may have one query that gets just the basic data, just a few columns out of the table, and then another more detailed query that selects all the data, all the columns that are in the database. Okay. And then each query will have a unique name and description, and so that lets you provide a list for the author to choose from where they can get some sense of what each query is and when they would want to use one over the other. Okay, so that's the configuration part. That's the part that the application developer does. Now, once that's all set up, as an author, you want to be able to stick these data queries into your documents so that your documents are populated with all this yummy data, right? So how that works is you go into your document, you put your cursor where you want the data to appear, and then you go to Insert Markup, and so you get that Insert Markup dialog. But then at the bottom, there's a place where you can select the mode, and so you can insert elements or you can insert processing instructions or whatever. And in that list, one of the choices is query. So if you set that mode to query, then it's going to show you a list of all the queries that have been defined for that document type. And then you select the one you want, and if there are any parameters for that query, then it will pop up the dialog and say, well, which department do you want, or whatever your queries are, or whatever your parameters are. And then you'll get back in most cases, you'll get back a sample that shows you what the query results look like. And you can set the update preferences. So you have there are three independent options there. So there's manual update, which means that you can update the data in the document by choosing a menu item. Okay, so a person actually opens the document, goes to the menu, and selects update this query. And then at that point, it will go out, hit the database, pull in the current values as of that moment, and populate the data. You can have auto update on open, and what that means is that whenever somebody opens that document, the first thing it does is it looks for the queries. And any query that's marked as update on open, it will go out and update the data at that point. And you can auto update on compose, which means, as you would expect, whenever someone composes that document to print or HTML or whatever, that as part of the composition process, it will check those data merge queries and see if they need to be updated. And if they're marked for update on compose, it will go out, hit the database, pull in the latest data, and then compose. And those are, as I said, those are independent, so you can select one or you can select manual update or not. You can select auto update on open or not, and auto update on compose or not, or any combination of those. The data preview you get, generally if you're importing it as a table, then what you'll see is a table in a dialog like this that you can scroll through and look at and make sure that it's giving you the section of data that you expect, and then you can set the update preferences there. Okay, once you've inserted the query in the document, then you should see the result of the query there. So in this screenshot here, you can see we've inserted a query. If you look closely, you can see that there's a little, it's like a little road merge sign that you would see on the freeway where you have an entrance ramp. Okay, that's the little icon for a data merge query. And this table is the result of that query. So this is the table that's built by pulling the data out of the database and putting it into a table. Okay, so to do a manual update, if you've got a query in your document, you just put the cursor inside the query result, go to the menus and choose Tools, Data Merge, Update Current, and that will update the query that you're in. Or if you want, you can choose Update All, and then all the queries in the document will be updated all in one shot. You can also flatten a query. So if you do a query once, if you want to sort of pull some data in and have it just as a snapshot of what was current at the time that you made the query, you can do that. So you insert the query and let it populate, and then you go in and flatten it. And what that does is it basically removes the query part and just leaves the markup behind that it constructed, as if you had typed it in manually. Okay, so I'm going to go through a little example here.
Before you do that, I have a question.
Oh. Sure.
Sorry. Okay. Is it possible to sum the value of a column and then add a percentage, like for a quote?
Yeah, you would be able to do that. Yeah, that would be part of the SQL query, and that's a little bit beyond the scope of what I'm talking about today. But I can actually show you. Maybe I can show you. Hold on a second. Let me start up my text editor, and what I'll do is I'll show you the SQL query that I set up for that department summary table where it's calculating averages and things for departments. Mm-hmm. And so I'll you can get a sense of how those kind of calculations work in SQL. As far as actually how you would set up that specific kind of thing, that's kind of beyond the scope of what I'd like to do today. But
I have a comment from another one of the participants that SQL returns record set.
Right, but when it goes, the machinery that Arbortext uses to do that, it it converts it to that XML format that I showed you. Okay, so the record set is used basically behind the scenes to construct that XML fragment that you get, that Arbortext gives you, that you can then apply an XSL transformation to. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me see. I think it's this one. Okay, so this is the query where we're doing the department summary. So we're selecting department name. We're using the maximum function here because the department ID is going to be the same for all the department names, but because of the fact that we're grouping by department, you can't just select that field by itself. You have to have some kind of aggregating function on it. And so you could use max or min or average. They'll all return the same because it's all the same value. Okay, count. So the count gives you the number of records in each group. And then you take the average of the salary and round it to 2 decimal places. And we're selecting from the employees table, and we're grouping by department. And you can specify a sort order too, so you can say order by average salary descending. So it's going to put the department with the highest salary first and go down from there. Okay. And yeah, I'm pretty sure that you can do, scalar math. So if you wanted to, add up some values and add 15% or 20% or whatever, I think you could do that by just, multiplying by the appropriate factor. Okay, so does that answer your question, or kind of give a hint at the answer anyway?
Yes, thank you. And another comment from another person is, Clay, this is awesome.
Oh, okay, good.
Yes, another feedback regarding that is good hints. So you're hitting it.
Good. Okay, so I'm going to show a little bit about sort of what this looks like to actually work with it. So this is my DMF file. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but a couple things I want to point out. I've got several queries I've defined here. You can see in my sort of tree view of the XML, I've got a whole slew of queries here. And these are the queries that are then available to authors to use. So if I'm in this document and I want to insert a query, I go to the Insert Markup here, and I select Query in the Mode thing. And now this shows me the queries that I've defined. So these correspond to these query elements in my DMF file. Okay, so there's department employee list, and that's by department, department summary by department, and then you can get a department summary list, a department summary table, a full employee list, and then these are all based on an Excel spreadsheet. So I have this Excel spreadsheet here, which contains this data, and that's my main data source for this. I did also create an Oracle database with essentially the same data in it, just to make sure I could figure out how to connect to an Oracle database, and it does work. So you can do basically the same query on a different database, and in this case you get the same results because I copied the data from one spot into the other. But in general. So that illustrates that, you know, you can have some queries that hit one database and other queries that hit a different database, and you can make those all available to your author through this one interface. So let me insert.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead.
Can I query an XML file instead of a DB?
Good question. If it was in something like ExistDB or MarkLogic or something like that, I think you could. If it's just a flat file on the file system, I'm not sure. You'd have to have an ODBC driver that could, you know, convert that XML file into something that could be queried with SQL. Okay, and I actually have not really looked into it, so I have no idea if such a thing exists. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if it did, but it also wouldn't surprise me if it didn't. So I really can't say. But that's what you would want to look for if you wanted to do that from a flat file. Would be an XML ODBC driver.
Okay, someone else asked a question related to that. Then, is even with an XQuery?
No, this doesn't. This feature doesn't understand XQuery. Well, let me qualify that. It's possible that there is some kind of driver out there that makes an XML file look like an ODBC database, but that understands XQuery in addition to SQL. But you know, it's not something that I have any personal experience with, so I don't know. You know, I can't say for sure even that such a thing exists, or if it does, how you would go about using it. I mean, I have some ideas about what you would try if you could find a driver like that, but you know, not having done it, I can't say for sure that it would work or how well it would work. I mean, if you want to do that kind of stuff. Yeah, I think this is probably the wrong mechanism for doing that kind of thing.
So a couple of feedbacks from a couple of people. I told you it's a very active group.
No, that's good.
One comment from one person was that there must be such a driver. Another comment from another one is that there is an XML ODBC driver available. Not sure what it offers, though.
Okay. Well, there you go. So, you know, the first step would be to get that driver and install it, and then you would have to set up your XML file as an ODBC data source using that driver, right? The way that I described in the earlier slides, through that control panel applet. And then once you've got that set up, then you would be ready to put together a query on it. Now, I don't know the details of that driver, so I don't know. It's possible that that driver would understand XQuery. So if that's the case, then you would be able to use XQuery that way. But if it doesn't, then you might have to just stick with standard SQL.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Okay. So let's see where we're. Oh, I was going to insert a query. So let's see. Let's insert a department summary by a summary data field by department. So this is a query that's parameterized. So it wants to know what department I'm interested in. So let's say I'm interested in finance. I can select finance, and then it wants to know which field do I want to insert. So this is actually just an atomic thing. It's basically grabbing one value out of the database, one variable value for one record. And so I'll put in the average salary, okay, and insert, and there it is, okay. So this is one thing you have to be a little bit careful about, is that you know, it's letting me sort of insert some text. It puts the query in here, but it ends up inserting text where text shouldn't be. So you would want to actually grab that query and move it inside your paragraph, and then it's legal. Okay, so if you wanted to grab individual data elements and stick them into some sort of template structure or whatever in your document, you can do it that way too. It's much easier if you just so this is the one that I showed in that one slide, the summary list. This is where I'm applying a transformation to it to give me an ordered list with the numbered list items instead of a standard table. So this shows me what the input, what the output's going to look like, and then if that's what I'm expecting, I can say, okay, go ahead and insert it, and then there it is. Okay. So let's see. Let me illustrate updating. So notice that in this table here, this is actually stale data. If you look at Stephen King's salary, it says it's $24,000. Okay. Now, if I go into the data source and look at what's in there now, his salary shows up as $100,000. Okay. So it looks like I need to do an update. Now, this query isn't set up to auto-update on open. So what I can do is I can stick my cursor in here. I can go to Tools, Data Merge, Update Current, and then it will update that table for me. So if I go back up to the top, I can see that now Stephen King's salary is showing up as the $100,000 that's in the current up-to-date table. That's also where your options are for if you want to flatten it. So if you want to flatten this thing so that it's not a query anymore, it's just a plain vanilla table, then you would choose that. If you want to update all, then you select that, and all the queries in the document get updated at the same time. Okay.
So here's sorry, I have a question. Let's say my file is peppered with elements. I want to update. Can I update them individually with this?
Right, that's right, yeah. So if you want to update this one but not this one, then you just put the cursor inside your query here. You go to this and you say update current, and that will only update the one that currently has the caret inside it. Okay. If you want to flatten, well, if you want to update everything, then you choose this one. So you have a choice of either updating just one at a time or updating everything all at once. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, sure. Okay, well, I guess that's about it. Is there anything else that anybody's interested in looking at more closely?
While I wait for people to type in their questions, quite a few of you have asked, and I'll go ahead and I tried to reply to everybody, but I'll let you know that we are recording this presentation. You will get a notice sent to you in the email as soon as we get it uploaded to a place for later playback for you. So, and again, if you have any questions or anything specific you'd like to take a look at, please go ahead and type it into the question box.
Okay, well, while people are typing, I'll go ahead and move ahead to my additional resources slide. So these are just some places where you can get some more information about some of the pieces that go into using data merge. If you're really new to databases and haven't used them before, this is a nice introduction that sort of walks you through how databases work and how to think about them. Here's an overview of ODBC technology and how it works. There's a SQL tutorial at W3 School. They have a lot of cool tutorials about HTML and various other things, and they have one about SQL. So if you need help constructing that query language, that's a good place to start. XSLT resources, there's lots of good ones on the web. This is one that's particularly good, I think. So if you want to take that output from that record set XML and transform it into some arbitrary structure that's not just a standard table, that's where to go for information about that. And then a good general resource is the adapters list, which is a discussion group managed by the PTC user website. It's one of their forums. So if you have a login on that site, you can go and you can subscribe. There's lots of good information there. I suspect that most people who are tuned into this already know about adapters, but if you don't, it's just a really wonderful resource. So check it out. Sign up. People post questions there all the time, and you'll usually get an answer back pretty quick, and it's usually a pretty good answer. So
I had one question from the audience. They were wondering, does this apply to technical manuals or only to database publishing?
Well, you can use it for any kind of documents you want. I mean, the main thing is just that, you have a requirement to pull in some data from a database. So if you're publishing a technical document and, well, I'm trying to think of what a use case would be for some sort of like software manual or something where you would have data in a database that you wanted to slurp into your manual. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe if you're doing some kind of product documentation, you might have some part data about spare parts or replacement parts or something that you might want to pull in. Maybe some kind of specification information about a particular model of whatever kind of widget you're selling. Something along those lines might be use cases for this kind of technology. So, you can use it basically any kind of document type that where you have a need to access that kind of data. It doesn't really matter what it is.
I'm pretty sure that my sales team is going to want this. We do all our quotes and proposals through XML publishing, and I know they'd like to pull it out of the price list.
Right, sure.
So I'm fairly certain they're going to ask me for this any minute now that they've seen it.
Okay. Well, the thing about that is that if you're talking about like building an invoice for a specific customer account, you would need to have that. That would have to be in the database, I think, in order to be able to do what you want to do with it. I'm assuming that what they want to be able to do is they want to be able to insert this line item and this line item and this line item and get a total at the bottom. Is that the sort of thing you're referring to? So
We're
in that
doing
case,
that, yeah.
Okay, so in that case, you would have to have something in the database that says, this is customer order number XYZ, and so pull those things in and render them this way, and then calculate the total at the bottom. The only way that I know of that you can do that kind of calculation is to have the database do it.
Oh, we're doing it the hard way then, because we're doing that all in XSL.
Okay. Well, that would work too, actually. Now that you mention that, you could, you could have your XSL style sheet take the record set you get back and have the XSL do the calculation instead of the database itself.
Yeah.
So that would work too. It would get it would get interesting if you wanted. You'd still have to have that in the database though, because you'd have to be able to pull in the right subset of records. See, the thing is, if you try to pull in the line items individually, then you'll be applying a separate XSL transformation to each line item, and that's not really what you want. So you would have to have, again, some kind of an invoice number or something in the database, and the user would, the salesperson would go in and create, and through some database interface, and say, this is my invoice number X, and it contains this line item and 2 of these line items and 1 of this one and then this add-on or whatever. And then once you've got that set up, then your query can be, okay, go grab everything that's in this invoice number and make it into a table or whatever format you want, and then add a line at the bottom, a footer saying, and the total is blah blah blah.
Yeah, I should probably pull it together and do a presentation one year.
There you go.
So we have one more comment. It says the SQL returns XML, which I XSLTify.
Right.
Testify, my brother. There we go.
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you, Clay. It's been a wonderful presentation.
Well, good. Thank you.
So I have one more. Let's see. Here it is. Great presentation. Very educational.
Oh,
it wasn't a question. It was more of a comment.
Right. Well, that's fine. We welcome those too.
Oh, another comment. This is so cool.
Well, yeah, I think this is very cool technology, and that's why I decided to put together a presentation on it. I mean, well, there's 2 aspects of it. It's cool technology, and the way it's documented in Arbortext is a little bit, there's little pieces of documentation here and there, and you have to kind of work at it to put the pieces together and figure out how the whole thing works. Mm-hmm. And so having gone through that once myself, I kind of decided, you know what, I should write this down so that, it makes more sense, and you've got some sort of a soup to nuts process for doing this.
Cool.
So, a couple more comments. Great job, Clay.
Thank you.
And Clay, you're the best. And South Africa, we have somebody from South Africa that would like to thank you for doing this.
Oh, well, good. You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
All right, thanks. Thanks, everybody, for attending. Hopefully we'll see you next month when the topic is the data ROI for e-learning specializations. And then we've got ISODraw coming up in June. Thank you, Clay.
Sounds great. Thanks, Liz.
Janice, do you want to end the session?
Yes, I'm going to end the session now.
Oh, wait, we have... we have one more comment?
One more comment, Clay, before you go.
Okay.
So thank you for a great presentation. I had questions for my engineers if Arbortext had this capability.